Hello, I'm Tyler Joyce.
Hey, I'm Giselle Fussa.
And I'm Nancy Garcia.
And we're going to be talking about the Old Testament, starting in Genesis. The book of Genesis begins with God creating the world, humanity, and everything in general, declaring it as good. It tells of how sin entered through Adam and Eve, leading to the fall, the flood of Noah's time, and God's covenant promises. The story then shifts to the patriarchs, Abraham, Isaac, Jacob, and Joseph, showing how God begins forming a chosen people through which he will bless the world.
Then we move on to Exodus, which talks about the exiting of Egypt. Israelites were slaves until God sent their deliverer, which was Moses, and through the 10 plagues, they were able to exit Egypt. There we learn about the Passover and how God parted the Red Sea. We also see that they get the Torah, which are the 10 commandments. Then we move on to Leviticus, which talks about holiness. It talks about the 5 types of holy sacrifices and the second greatest command, which is love your neighbor as yourself.
We continue with Numbers, where we have the 40 years wilderness wandering. Gen 1 fails to enter land because of unbelief, and then we have Gen 2 that prepares to enter the land by faith. Then we have Deuteronomy, or Do It All Over Again, where we have the Moses 3 sermons and the first great command, love God with all.
Now to Joshua. Joshua leads Israel into the Promised Land after Moses' death, conquering key cities like Jericho. The land is divided between the 12 tribes, fulfilling God's promise to Abraham. Joshua challenges Israel to remain faithful to God before his death.
Then we move on to Judges, which talks about cycles. We see how the Spirit-filled military leaders, and we see how God rose Deborah, Gideon, and Samson. Then we also see sin, oppression, repentance, deliverance, and rest. Then we move on to Ruth, which talks about redemption. It tells the story of 2 widows who get redeemed through one of them marrying a wealthy man, which is a reference to how God is going to redeem his people.
Then we have First Samuel that talks about Saul. God blesses bearing Hannah with son Samuel. Eli's house falls, and Samuel becomes final judge. Samuel's house falls, and Samuel atones first king. Saul reigns in humility, then pride. There are 3 sins. David kills Goliath, and Saul hunts David. Continue with 2 Samuel. We have David that becomes the king. David reigns 40 years and establishes Jerusalem. David commits adultery and murder, and also his family suffers.
Now 1st and 2nd Kings. These books trace Israel's monarchy from Solomon's glory to the kingdom and decline, his kingdom and his eventual decline and exile. This highlights faithfulness and failures of each king, showing how idolatry and disobedience can lead to God's judgment. But it's okay because prophets like Elijah and Elijah appear as voices calling God's people back to him.
Then we move on to 1st and 2nd Chronicles, which talks about restoration. We see the Cyrus decree of return, and we see that the 12 tribes are called to reunite in Jerusalem.
Continue with the book of Ezra. We talk about law. Zerubbabel rebuilds the temple, and Ezra restores the law.
Nehemiah, serving a Persian king, returns to Jerusalem to rebuild the broken walls. Despite opposition, the wall is completed, and the people renew their covenant with God. The story emphasizes the leadership, perseverance, and restoring of both the city and spiritual life.
Then we move on to Esther, which stands for providence. This actually happened between Esther and Nehemiah. It talks about how Mordecai raises Esther, while Haman plots against the Jews. But that's okay, because Queen Esther saves Jews from destruction.
Thank you for watching our video on the Old Testament, Genesis to Esther.